So we started working on 2026 headliners maybe in December, so way ahead of 2025 even happening.
With someone like Sleep Token, how could you have seen that 2 years ago?
There was some trust and hope, and hoping that the buzz around it was going to explode as much as it did.
I mean, the buzz has been incredible, and it has continued consistently. They just keep getting bigger. They've even had their number ones now. If that hadn't happened, would you have just been like, okay, this year we have a small headline? Were you expecting any backlash when they were announced? So the very first thing then is, how did you get started in music?
So I think it was always going to be what happened for me. I grew up in Camden. I was like an emo kid at the Lock. I used to go to Subverse, the underworld, sort of under 18s gigs. All my money would go on gig tickets. So I think it was like predetermined for me. But after uni, I was basically like everyone else looking for a job. And through a friend, I managed to get an internship at an independent label called Cooking Vinyl. So exciting. But my actual job was inputting lyrics into a database for the sync department.
All right.
So like not the glamour and glitz that you'd expect, but I was just like, I just knew I was at the bottom of the ladder, but at least I was on the ladder. And I was there for a few months, and they shared a building with a music distribution company who, I guess just through meeting other colleagues, I was then offered my actual first paid job in a music distribution company called Essential. And I was basically monetizing YouTube videos, which personally was not my passion. I'm sure it's some people's. But again, I was just like, well, first I was interning and now I'm paid and it's still in music. Let's just keep going. And I'm still friends with so many of the people that I met in that building. They have gone on to do amazing things. And we've all just come from that little independent bubble in Acton where we all were.
You must have been super young at that point if you're straight out of uni.
I must have been like 22.
Nice.
So I was just really happy to be there. Like everyone else, I've heard it's hard to get into. So I was just like delighted to be in it amongst it. After that, I kind of got I moved into what I think is more relevant to what I do today. And it was my first sort of job being an office assistant at Duff Press.
Oh, cool.
Who represent the likes of Slash. Like I got to hang out with Dave Lombardo one day on a press day. That's the first time I started doing like festival PR work. I think we did Ramblin' Man and a couple of those. And for me, that was just eye-opening. I was like, I can do this. I love the buzz around it. This is, I don't know in what capacity, but this is where I want to be. So I'm really grateful to that lot for kind of taking a chance on me. I had no PR experience. And after that, I managed to I was kind of hopping around like part-time, short-term roles. And I landed at Spine Farm, which is the rock and metal arm of Universal. And it's the first time that I was like at a major label in a more corporate setting. Everywhere else had been like tiny families of like great friends doing music things. And this was much the same, but in a really corporate environment. But it was amazing because the kind of artists that I then started to sort of actively get to work with was like Ghost's Cerise album, the radio plugging, or I got to take bands out myself on for radio interviews. And I was more in charge than I'd ever been.
So you were in-house PR for them?
Yeah, in-house radio plugger and like with their great in-house team. And that's how sometimes you get to work with your biggest artists at the start because it is an in-house thing. And I mean, Ghosts are obviously gigantic now, but at the time I could still feel there was something so special. And my career has kind of followed theirs a little bit in that I'm still working with them now. So it's a nice full circle moment for me. So I was there for a little while. That was only ever meant to be like a fixed term position, like a lot of things at that level are. And from that, I managed to secure like a permanent full-time radio assistant role at the Noise Cartel, who are independent but massive in the genre that we are interested in.
Noise Cartel are actually the first music company that UPRAWR got like a partnership with. It wasn't like an official partnership, but they were the first ones that we like did a lot with when we first started.
Noise Cartel are important in a lot of people's kind of experience of music industry. From what I found, it's a really warm place. They have a real eye for who fits into their team and who they want to work with. And I'm still Like Nelly, who was my boss at the time, is literally still one of my best friends. And I'm so thankful that I got to work there and like learn from their incredible roster, their really like small team kind of loyalty way of working. And I was there for a few years, just chugging away, working on bands like Parkway and A Day to Remember with Nelly. Then I started to get to work at Download Festival, looking after the bands that they represent in all those festivals. So that was like my first non kind of ticket buyer experience of Download Festival.
When would that have been?
So I guess that must have been like 2015, 2016. And I was really, really happy there. I learned a lot. But what I was starting to realize for me is that the thing that and I wouldn't have known this at the beginning, you only know this by kind of experiencing all these jobs and all these departments and learning the ecosystem, is that I actually love the live side of it more than I do like maybe the album or single side. That's really what has made me sort of obsessed since the beginning. And I got to a place where I wasn't just trying to get my foot in the door at this point. I was maybe starting to curate exactly where I wanted to end up. And Live Nation was just always on the horizon for me. I think I must have applied for 3 or 4 different jobs before I actually managed to succeed in securing my first role. And the feedback was always like, you're really suited to this company. It's just, this isn't the role for you. And I think I applied for things like press assistant or digital marketing, like junior. And then finally in 2018, I saw a promoter assistant role come up and I applied. I was recommended by a few people, thankfully, from the connections I'd made. And I got it. Like, I remember I was on holiday when I got the text saying I got the job, and I literally just like jumped out of my seat and hugged my boyfriend at the time. And I was just so happy. That was like my proper, like, oh my God, I'm finally here moment. And it was working as a promoter assistant for a promoter called Anna Sophie Mertens. She mostly focused on like country and pop, sort of more mainstream stuff, but my music taste is pretty varied. So I was really happy to do that. I got to work on tours like Ariana Grande and a load of country artists, and that actually I think has grown my love for more genres than maybe I would have had at the start. Interestingly, it's so funny because I wasn't actually hired to work under Cam Hack, who I currently work with. He was kind of assigned to my desk after a few months or however long, because things within the team had shifted, and I was working across both of them for a good few years. Hard work, I might add. Like, the stress of live music is second to none. But I loved it. I was learning everything. It was something that I was learning from scratch. If you asked me when I was 18, like, what's a promoter? I have no idea. And so it was learning everything, like how a venue connects with the promoter, what the contracting is, what does an agent do? And just, yeah, so that was in 2018. And just after COVID, the amount of work that was coming through was just humongous. And I narrowed it down to just working with Cam. And just before COVID, I'd been invited into the Download Festival meetings, not necessarily to play an active role, but maybe to input my opinion now and again, or to help with a bit of the paperwork. And that just grew and grew and grew. And it was basically just coincidence that I was working with Cam, and it was also my music taste. And Andy Copping, I think, has an eye for who within his teams would be beneficial to bring into the Download sphere. And because I didn't apply for the job knowing that I had anything to do with Download, it kind of just manifested as I embedded myself in the team, and it was known that that was my interest. And here we are.
I mean, I guess that was the perfect job then, because if you'd got one of those 4 previous ones that you'd applied for, you'd have probably worked those roles thinking, I hope I'll get promoted, or I hope I can move to being a promoter assistant.
100%. And you know what? The amount of, whenever a job goes up in my team, there is a ton of internal application, but the competition is insane for those roles. And while I was genuinely devastated every time that I got so close and I was told, you are a good fit, just not for this, was really, really hard. In hindsight's 2020 though, isn't it? Because I got the role that I loved the most, and that's why I've been in that kind of team for so long, because it was the right fit and it was worth the kind of the pain, I think.
That shows that they're awesome at hiring though. And like, I've been on the other end where I've had somebody that I think like, this is an awesome person that I'd love to give a job to. We don't have the job for them, but I just want them to work with us. So I give them the job and then it just does not work out.
I think it might actually delay whatever their progress might have been otherwise.
Yeah.
Because I think moving internally is probably a lot harder. You feel like you have to placate and stay somewhere for longer. And actually the way it happened for me was kind of a dream come true.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the podcast, but if you're enjoying it, please give us a rate and a review on Spotify or Apple. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a subscribe. It really, really helps the channel knowing that we've got the subscribers and people are listening and rating and reviewing it. It'll help us keep booking more guests and doing more podcasts. So do us that one little favor and we'll be able to keep booking more people and keep doing more episodes. Back to it. What was the sort of day-to-day then that you were doing as a promoter assistant when you started?
So it's literally you're basically working closely with an artist's agent, and they come to you and they're like, hey, I've got so-and-so coming into the country, maybe at the end of 2026. Let me know what cities you'd be comfortable offering on, what venues are suitable. And that's like a mutually agreeable conversation. The promoter doesn't necessarily dictate it, but that's the basis of it. And I then get in touch with those venues, find out what their calendars are, try and hold dates to create what might be a coherent routing, knowing how many days off they need, when the start date works, if there's a festival in between. Like, it is a bit of a puzzle situation. Then you get into the financials of it. You build an offer essentially to present, considering what you would spend on marketing, what you would spend on venue hire, what the immigration visa costs would be, all these tiny details, how many forklifts you need if it's an arena show, for example. That gets built, sent to the agent, argues with the promoter for a bit to bring the money up, which is then presented to the artist management, approved or edited, and then we go ahead and plan when it would be best to announce it. You liaise on artwork, you get approvals on assets, depending on the size of the tour, maybe that's as far as you go. Sometimes you get marketing more involved, PR if they need to do TV spots for a giant artist, for example. And then you basically build, like, kind of very technically, you build in a database the date, what's the age restriction, what's the door time, all these things, and you confirm it to the venue. And then it gets announced. You track the sales, you make sure they get into country with the immigration involvement from the agent and yourselves, attend the show, plan for the next one, what festival do they play, what's the next step venue size wise. And it's just kind of a cycle. You're never really, before you finish a tour, you're already talking about the next one. And that's across 100 artists a year. So
with your job then now, are you primarily working on download?
I'd say it's 50-50. My role is really hybrid in that way, that because I wasn't hired to do download, I'm hired to do my main role, which is currently senior UK tour executive. And 50% of my time is then me having to juggle how I then also do download. I mean, the download team, we all have to do the same thing. Everyone on that team, is their only job isn't download, at least in the booking team. And Cam, for example, he's now the head of the booking team, but he's also a promoter at Live Nation. So luckily, I think throughout the year, it ebbs and flows in terms of, right now, I'd say 90% of my job is download because it's 3 weeks away. Maybe in September, touring's really, really demanding, so we do a bit less of download, but overall, I'd say it's 50%.
How early does that booking start? Is this sort of like a rolling thing?
So much earlier than you'd imagine. So we started working on 2026 headliners maybe in December. So way ahead of 2025 even happening.
Right.
And I remember last year we finished the festival and we had a festival call, like a meeting with all 5 of us on Monday morning. So I was like, this really truly never stops. And you know what is the competition, because every other festival's doing the same thing.
Yeah, of course. That's quite crazy with this year's lineup then, because you can look at someone like Green Day and say, yeah, that's in 2 years they're still going to be huge because they have been forever. But then with someone like Sleep Token, how could you have seen that 2 years ago?
Sleep Token was an artist that Live Nation already worked with. Like, they played at the Great Escape Showcase. They did their first few shows with, like, they've been on our radar for a really long time. And I guess part of it is just belief, but also tracking how quickly they were growing, even at the really small stages. It's not a foolproof it's not a foolproof approach, but it was a really early indicator. And we genuinely were happy to see that we had just announced them as headliner, but then their tour numbers for the November tour were already really, really high. So we were feeling quite safe by that point. Having said that, there's still that period where you do have them locked in, even if they're not announced, where maybe we didn't have those tour numbers immediately. So there was some trust and hope, and hoping that the buzz around it was going to explode as much as it did.
I mean, the buzz has been incredible, and it has like continued like consistently. They just keep getting bigger. They've even had their number ones now. If that hadn't happened, would you have just been like, okay, this year we have a small headline?
Do you know, I don't know how to answer that question because we've never had that situation before. I hope we always avoid it, but I think there will always be a large amount of people that enjoy that set, whether it's the full sold out festival audience or not. It's still a festival that caters to a really wide number of genres and like people's interests. And I don't think we'd ever book someone that would just literally be totally wrong. So I just think it's what degree of success rather than it was a total failure. Because then I think we really would need to relook at how we book.
I guess this time it just has worked out amazingly. In the past, there's obviously been a lot of bands that are just they've been big for a long time and it's sort of stable. I guess taking that risk on the newer ones blowing up is what creates those moments that everyone thinks are special. Other than it just being like, oh, it's the same old shit. We know what we're getting.
And some people want to see that, and I think people enjoy those sets, but they don't feel the buzz of the announcement. And Download has many critics, even though they love the festival. They're super vocal because they feel like they own it, and they do. But I guess we learn from every year's risk level, and Bring Me the Horizon, massive. It's not comparable, but putting them in the headliner's slot for the first time was a risk of sorts.
Yeah.
And it paid off really, really, really well. Does that then have a knock-on effect to how you then decide to take a slightly greater risk with Sleep Token? Yes. So kind of for us, it's an incremental level of like learning and experimenting that thus far seems to have worked.
If that continues in about 3 or 4 years, I might be able to headline.
Anything is possible at this point. And do you know, if that happens, this video is going to be really, really viral.
It really will. I hope it happens just for that. How important is it to you that you're bringing the new bands up then? Because it'd be hard to like sort of put a time on it in my head because I get everything wrong. But I think like sort of 7-8 years ago was a period where all of the bands that were playing Download or headlining Download were sort of heritage. And that sort of like really moved away from that. And I think, you guys might completely disagree, but looking at it, there was a risk of it being like, if it doesn't become younger, then all the people that have been coming for 30 years are going to age out because they're going to get like 70. All the bands are going to be too old to play. And then there's going to be nothing huge that can take its spot. Was that ever something that was discussed as a worry?
I've been thinking about how I answer these questions, and I actually think the answer here is that we're not choosing to retire a certain type of band. Those people who came to Download at the beginning might be around the age that I will be in a few years, and they feel about those acts the way I feel about the current acts. So I just think it's a cyclical movement, like it's literally time passing has a consequence. So it's not an active decision to be younger. It's just deciding to bring up the bands that are the level that the legacy bands were at that point in their career, with a sprinkling of maybe more risk taking with those particular like breakthroughs like Sleep Token. So it's not lost on us that we can't rely on a 70-year-old audience for the rest of time. But that will still be catered for. That is still catered for. Like only 2 years ago, we still had Metallica, and they're not a breaking act under anyone's definition. So it's just we can book up to like 120 bands in that festival. There's space for everyone, and there is some kind of movement to make sure that we're not lagging behind with the time.
When you book one of these new ones, what's the sort of the difference in the process between booking a legacy, in sense of, if you've got a legacy band, they've played big shows and they've played festivals and they've got their sets and they know what's going on stage. My assumption is that someone like Sleep Token that's not done something on that scale, they're doing it for the first time, they're having to build everything for the first time. Is that something that you're part of the process of, or do you just leave it to them in the hope that they turn up with something cool on the day? Like, using Bring Me as the example, their stage was really cool. I don't know whether it was the first time they'd had a stage that big, but they definitely fucking brought it.
They've always had great staging. I know for a fact they specifically knew that it had to be up like 10 levels for download, and that's what we saw. We, as festival, we are not part of like influencing that. We just facilitate, because your staging is very much creative license, right? No more than we would recommend what set list you play or how you write your song. As promoters who've worked with those acts in our other role for many years, then there is a lot of feedback of what works best for the staging of a band that's developing like Sleep Token. I mean, a lot of it's not to claim the idea in any way, but people like Andy and Cam have been around a long time and do have discussions with management and with artists about ideas and cool stuff they saw other bands do, and like what would work well for a particular song. And download just aims to facilitate whatever the end result is. I think, interestingly, with a lot of bands who haven't played before, they feel the weight of presenting something incredible, maybe more than a legacy act does. So I think they're often the ones that might bring the most innovative or blowout production they can think of, because it's their first.
How does it work with the payment? Is it just sort of like there's a lump sum and it's up to them how they want to spend it, or do things like production come into it?
There's all types of deals that can be made. For obvious reasons, I can't go into like mass amounts of detail. But it kind of depends. If it's a band you really, really want to play, you will be open to their proposal for, hey, what's my fee? And on top of that, to present an amazing show, is there a contribution that can be made for the production? And that sort of deal negotiation does exist. It's not every act, but we're at liberty to sort of do what we need to do within reason to make it viable for a band to come and make their best presentation.
I remember, I don't know when it was now, years ago, AC/DC. I think it was AC/DC anyway, but they brought their own stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that was told much in advance. So it really had loads of our team scrambling. It was before my time, but Andy speaks about it fondly now, probably not as fondly back then, where I think they were literally like, we're going to bring our own stage, not just our own staging. And you do what AC/DC say. So I think it was a massive challenge for all those teams that actually do the production, the people on the build on site, like a proper achievement. Also massively well paid off, because I think it's still the most successful download.
Yeah, I think that sort of went down as like the biggest ticket sales.
Yeah. And sometimes you're like, God, this seems insurmountable. This is so difficult. Like, do we say yes? And thank God that they did and made it work.
I guess the things that are hardest at the time are the things that are the best stories afterwards.
It's exactly that. Like, you just need to let a few months pass, and then you can maybe remember it in a funnier way.
With Sleep Token again, how early in their career were you working with them?
So I think I started working with Camp. I was there at the Great Escape when they played, and the Great Escape is like breaking bands, tiny, like 200 cap dingy venue. I was there. I can't really remember if I was working with them at that time, but for sure when they played Lafayette. They did like sort of a stripped back Lafayette set. God, I wish I could remember the year. I can't. But from then on, I was part of the team working on them with Cam, and have just watched them do every show since. And we work really closely with management. Cam has a great relationship with the band, and I think it will continue.
You don't have to say who, but because of the success of this gamble, are there any other bands that you're looking at that are smaller that you're gambling on for the next couple, or considering gambling on for the next couple?
I think we are, like I said, we've already kind of been in conversation about our headliners for 2026. And there's definitely, I mean, we hope that there will be new headliners once they're actually locked in. Possibly not to the same degree of gamble. But that's 2026 exclusively. Like 2027, 2028, we're definitely open to seeing what band falls in that sort of consideration pool.
Fingers crossed something does
Yeah.
percolate, something does blow up. Were you expecting any backlash when they were announced?
Do you know what? I think I always expect backlash for literally any booking at this point. But I think we were not in a negative way, just like nervous for how much people maybe wouldn't get it, and were generally pleasantly surprised. And what we saw more so is that anyone who was being quite negative, even if some of their points are valid or not, is kind of not the point. It wasn't anyone within the company or management or the band that had to kind of go in and correct any misconceptions. It was all self kind of moderation by the pool of fans within whatever platform they were talking on. So I just thought, if there's someone being like, terrible booking, and there's 8 people being like, they're amazing, have you even listened? Why not just because they're new? That was all we needed to see.
Yeah, I guess you sort of laughed at that as well, so it probably calmed.
Yeah, I'm like, thank God someone's saying the stuff we want to say, because I'm not allowed to go in and argue with someone on a download forum. Do you
Yeah,
know
of
what I
course.
mean? But it's nice to see it when it's rectified.
How many bands, sort of roughly give or take, are considered as headlines?
It kind of depends really on, because there's honestly 1,000 things that have to align for a headliner to lock in a festival play. So it could be that in the dream scenario, your first 3 approaches are your 3 confirmed acts. We've definitely had it where the number maybe has gone up to like in the 20s, and that's because the time period didn't work for them, or their album campaign changed, or for whatever reason that member isn't free that day. So the number could just vary massively, although it's capped by the amount of bands that actually are of a size that could headline.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's not that many in the grand scheme of things, I guess. Korn and Green Day, it's the first time that either of those have headlined. Green Day, I guess, for a while have been consistently sort of big enough. Korn, I think, have had like quite a serious resurgence. Like a few years ago, they probably really couldn't have headlined. Are there a lot of bands? I guess Limp Bizkit is the other example from last year, where they've sort of re-blowing up on TikTok, or there's that younger generation that are now lifting up bands that, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago weren't big enough, that are 20 years old but now sort of are. Like, is that something that you're really looking at and sort of revisiting, with it being like, we know that they previously weren't there, but these resurgences are bringing in the younger audience?
I think it's crucial, because it's kind of to the point I made earlier. Those are kind of the bands that I feel about the way someone might feel about their typical traditional headliner from when they were a specific age. So that for me is exactly where I see this festival going. And I mean, yeah, like you said, Green Day, it hasn't been that they haven't been big enough in any way. I think they're just able to play outside of genre specific festivals really easily. And they are they're mainstream, not in a sellout way. They are widely loved, even if they're of a specific genre. So for us, it was just when the time is right, we will have them, and that aligned, which is great because I love Green Day. Korn, it's very much like download staple band, always super well respected, have never quite like broken through that like second stage headliner or like second from top for a while. And actually their performance at 2022, we knew standing on the stage watching that could have been a headline set. And so many other things happened afterwards, which then just made us more sure. But literally, it's a different feeling when you're watching a band do a set that feels like it's a headline set.
Does that really influence actually the decision? Like if you're there on the day and you're all watching?
Massively. Because it's actually more than numbers, more than charting, more than whatever you want. If live, they can carry a full sold out main stage crowd and it be like spine tingling, then that's really all you need.
Is that something then that affects the decision on the younger ones or the newer ones coming through? Because someone like Korn have played like 1 billion times on 1 billion stages all over the world. Like they know what they're doing inside out. The newer ones, I mean, Sleep Token really being the example, being so new to it. Do you worry that they're not going to be able to command that size of crowd?
No, I mean, because I kind of believe in the act anyway, but because I've seen them play your Wembleys, your O2s, multiple O2s. So it's just, no, it's not that big a punt. Once you go from 20,000 to 50,000, I don't think the difference is huge in terms of whether you are commanding the whole room and the atmosphere is electric. That will translate really well into whatever size that festival crowd is.
With the Korns and the Limp Bizkits and people like that, do you see in the ticket sales, like sort of in the data, that it's more that it's people our age bring in, maybe more my age, I think I'm older than you, but people sort of my age bring in their kids along, which increases the sale? Is it more that it's like 18-year-olds that have just discovered them?
I don't think we're able to track it so exactly because we have ticker buyer data available and it's a generalization, but you're not often able to tell who they've bought for. So it's quite hard. There's surveys that they can do, and I think there's ways that people can volunteer that information, but it's really hard just from a ticket buyer like list to fathom exactly. Where you can tell is when you see them do the set and you look at the crowd and you're like, oh, that's like way more mixed than I thought, or that's literally the exact thing I thought it was going to be.
Do you see much of a difference in bar sales? Like with the younger sort of audience, we see it with the club is if it's a band that's got an 18 to 20-year-old audience, they drink a lot less than the bands that have got a 40-year-old audience. Does that affect the festival or decisions made on that?
I have never made a booking decision, nor have any of my colleagues, based on what the bar take might be. But I also think that festivals of that scale are less vulnerable than a club might be to that. Because I don't think downloads audience has changed percentage-wise to the degree that suddenly most people aren't drinking. There's still a lot of people coming who are still going to drink a lot. And I don't see that changing for a while because it's not really a festival that only 18-year-olds come to at the moment. And I don't think that's what we want. But I know for a fact in the tour work that I do, there is a specific size of venue that they know if it's going to be an under 18 crowd, they might change their hire deal because it really, really hits them. And at the moment, they're just so vulnerable.
I don't want to jump around too much, but on that side of things, does that influence the tours that you book in outside of anything to do with the festivals?
It doesn't influence us. We will still book an artist no matter what. We might just either figure out what the ticket price needs to be for that higher venue, the higher venue hire to kind of be feasible, or we will change venue, or we'll look for, it just changes how you approach it rather than whether or not you work with that act.
Is it preferable? Actually, I might come back to this. So I won't ask that question. We'll stick with Download until we finish on Download. The other band we sort of wanted to bring up was President. they've obviously in the last couple of days like gone crazy viral.
Yeah.
How did that come about with the festival? Because they must have been confirmed long before
Yeah.
anything was announced.
So we were approached by management, as we are with any like secret set or any sort of up and coming, like really hot new act. They know who to approach. If you have a good manager and a good team, they'll know to get you in front of us long before anything is announced. We've known about President for months and months, and we've had that slot locked in, and we were anticipating the way that it was going to be sort of released bit by bit in the lead up to the Download performance and to now the tour the show that they're playing. So it's just about the team around you, your manager, your agent, whoever is working with you, knowing to reach out in anticipation of something blowing up.
Were you given like demos or things like that to listen to?
I actually don't think we were, but so much of what we do, the point of having an agent and the point of having a manager is that even though you might be a new act, they have pre-existing relationships. That means that a promoter or a festival booker would already trust what they're putting in front of you. So I don't think I heard, I mean, Cam may well have, I personally didn't, but because of who I was dealing with, I just knew that it was, like, I didn't need to vet it.
How important then is that relationship from the band's point of view for getting festivals or tour supports, anything sort of decent in the live world, for having like a great agent or a great manager?
I think it's really important. I mean, nothing will beat the fact that you need to be great live and have great songs, but there is such an intricate web of opportunities that you could be missing out on if you're not well represented. So whether someone gets you in on a support slot, maybe that headliner wasn't looking to find the new hottest act. It's actually just the agent who was like, well, you're looking and this is what I can offer you. And then because you're a great band, you get picked. Or it's just so important because the talent is the driver, but there's a lot of talent out there. So it's actually how you cut through the noise to the right opportunities. And I think that makes a huge difference to a breaking artist.
With Live Nation and Download in particular, you might not have this as an issue, but is there a lot, I guess it would matter more to smaller festivals where you've got a big agent or you've got a big manager and they know that you want their headline or you want their massive band and they use that as leverage to get the smaller ones on that you just don't actually want?
It definitely does happen at Download. It does. And no one's immune because Download might be very large in scale and have a really great history and sort of be important in that particular world. But you're never bigger than the biggest artist. So I think we're all in that boat.
Is it more the agents or the managers that, or the record labels? Like, who is it that?
All. Because you've got some titans of industry like to contend with. And if this agent tells you, this is what I want, you're sometimes in a position where it is worth finding space because of whatever the payoff might be.
And does that happen a lot?
Not a lot. No, definitely not. I wouldn't say that. Like it exists out there, but I don't think I could be in a job where half the festival is booked by favors. That would just make me so disheartened. So no, like it exists out there and sometimes it pays off really well because that act has an incredible set and you wouldn't maybe have given it otherwise. But no, just because you're bigger doesn't mean that you're immune from it.
Yeah. With President, do you think there's any worry that with the amount of how viral they've gone, they could just be too big for the set when it happens? Or does that make it more exciting?
I think it's exciting. I'm a booker, so I have one perception of what a busy set looks like. We have multiple teams within a festival sphere that is like staffing security, or what size does that tent need to be for the average amount of crowd sizes that those acts booked in it draw. Essentially, if everyone is safe, if a tent is full and you have to miss a set, that actually means it's kind of, there's a balance. It's essentially a great booking, right? If you're a headline artist and you're doing your own tour, you're aiming for it to sell out. That's actually the purpose of you putting shows on sale. So I think there's some of that that needs to be considered at a festival. Like, our aim isn't to have a half full tent.
That's fair. I mean, I guess as well for that band, if the whole thing was there was a shitload of people that couldn't even get in, that just builds the demand for when they do go on tour.
And that's such a driver for how they move up the festival slots. And it's also a really great indicator of what size venue they book for their next headline tour. Like, as long as it's not mismanaged, it being oversubscribed is an indicator of success for that band.
Watching all these bands and seeing this, then when you're at the festival, does that have a huge influence then following the festival and you booking those tours? Like, are you looking at bands thinking, shit, the next time they go on tour, we need this?
Sometimes. A lot of it is already it's pre-planned. It's rarely are we finding acts at our own festival. Us attending other festivals, different story. Maybe we're like, wait, that was amazing. Who's the team on that act? But generally, there's already touring way ahead of what you're seeing play out this summer. It might make you more motivated to go after an act that isn't yours, for example. But the thing that I'm realizing is that I tend to live 2 years ahead of where we are, and that's because 2025 is like old news for me at the moment. So,
When you talk about an act then that's not yours, do bands sign with a promoter?
there's no signing at a certain level. Worldwide, like global touring deals, I think those are contractually binding. I'm not involved in those, so I don't really know. Otherwise, no, it's very much like a verbal agreement, or just an agreement between you and the agent that this tour will be with this company, and you would hope if you do a good job, and because you have a good relationship with the band and they like you and you're delivering what they would want, then hopefully the next tour will also be with you. But that's not always a given, and they're not bound in any way. Like, the loyalty is not contractual.
Are you more keen on working on a full tour or just taking certain dates?
Full tour, I think. Give or take, there's some acts that generally just are more successful in some regions. And for those, then maybe you would be clever and be like, I'm happy for locals to take X city and I'll do the other markets. But overall, it's much easier to do a full tour. You're in control of it all. You're not having to sort of share the duties with companies that maybe work differently than you do. And if you're already working with an act, why would you not want to do all their shows?
Yeah. Goes to one of the bands that you mentioned that you've been with more or less from the start.
Yeah.
Were you working on their recent tour?
Yes. So Cam was the promoter and I was the tour executive on that tour. So we built the UK leg together, and he literally went to all the shows, was with Tobias, like for dinners, like while he was working out the final bits of the lighting. So he was like entrenched in it. And I was the person on Cam's team working on that tour for the UK. It's funny because I see Tobias now, he'll be like, I remember when you used to connect me for like phone interviews at Spine Farm, or like when you took me to whatever press activity, and I still seem to be around, just in a different capacity. So I love it.
I mean, it's pretty cool that you've had so many different jobs.
It is. And I think while I was in it, I felt quite lost and unsure. And I was like, God, maybe music is too hard to get into, and I just keep kind of treading water. I don't feel that anymore. I look back and I'm like, I have met people at every single one of those roles that I still speak to today, who are either great friends or fantastic contacts. And it's helped me in my role now to be well connected.
I mean, it's pretty nice, like, once you've been in it for a while, because you start with a lot of people that are all at the bottom with you. And as they progress through their jobs, there's a big network of people that you've been in it sort of from the start with.
And I think that's really hard to replicate if you haven't come up together. I think those relationships weather more storms. There is more than just a transactional sort of nature to them. And I just think that's invaluable.
In another like 30 years, you'll be one of the old people that have been in it forever, that everyone's going to be looking at being like, oh, how did we come here?
I wish that for me too.
With Ghost and their tour, did the giant fucking blow up on TikTok make a big difference to them?
I think it did. The sales for the previous Ghost tour were, I mean, the shows are great, still good, but it wasn't the like notable sellout, huge success that it was this time around. And I think their music's always been great. So I think so much of what maybe did change was how much more exposure they had just from the opportunities that virality maybe got them. Because the talent's always there, and he's been like, the shows are incredible. The lore behind it is like so intricate. The massive change that I think I've seen is that more people are just open to them.
How early did you see that difference in the ticket sales?
Immediately. Like, it's really, really strong sales from the start, which is just what you want to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream situation.
Yeah.
Back to download then. There's a lot of influencers that put stuff out and they get things. How important are the sort of influencers and the TikTok market and that sort of thing, the YouTube or the YouTubers, for promoting download? And does it make a particularly big difference to something that's so substantial anyway?
I don't know that I could answer that in terms of like a number. I can't give you a percentage. The way I think it's really important is that I think really huge metal festival can sometimes maybe be a bit daunting if you're of an age group where you're really only just starting to go to festivals. And it's like, for a lot of people, it's like a 5-day camping like situation. And I think the way that an influencer can portray an experience or talk about something, not via a commercial lens and not via a band's campaign, but more just through like, I'm doing what you would be doing, and this is what is hard, and this is what's not as scary as I thought, just makes it way more accessible for anyone that might be unsure.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I guess, yeah, looking at it like that, if you just see the pictures of big, scary, shirtless dudes with horns on their hats,
you're like, well, that's not my people. But
like, yeah. I mean, last year, TPD TV, the YouTube channel, their video sort of went viral. They had over 300,000 views. Do you have anything to do with reaching out to influencers, or are they reaching out to you? How does that work?
It's not my role particularly, because we are very much talent bookers. There's certainly teams that stay in touch with influencers throughout, and it goes both ways. Influencers know to reach out to press teams, for example, and press teams know what influencers they have seen are most appropriate for our audience. And I think it's a two-way street of like who you want to invite and who you will agree to invite because they reached out to you based on their social numbers or what kind of content they put out, or whether you could see it, whether you could see them enabling a particularly good piece of content. But I wouldn't want to speak out of turn because that I'm definitely not immediately involved there.
Is that more for the PR to deal with than the promoter?
Exactly that. And because they don't necessarily only work with those influencers one time a year for download. Those are, again, relationships that they're nurturing for their contact books for every project that they work on. So it's very much a pool of talent that you are always trying to keep fed.
Each year, is it more that you're looking to bring back people that have already come and had a good experience, or is it you're always trying to reach new people?
Do you know what? It really is 50-50. I don't think I've ever had a year where the directive has been one or the other. You're wanting to sell as many tickets as possible, and you're wanting to not neglect either side.
In terms of ticket sales then, how many, roughly percentage, what do you expect to be sold by the headline? Like how much does that headline influence the sales overall?
I don't know a percentage, but like most. The understanding is that it would be driven by the headliner, and sort of not incrementally, but like from second stage or kind of downwards, their impact might be less. It's extremely important for the headliner to sell a lot of the tickets.
So overall lineup, how important is it then that like the whole thing looks good together if the headline is the one that's selling everything?
I think the answer therein lies actually in what sort of competition you have for what other festivals might be pulling people's attention, because you will get headliners play more than just your festival in one summer. So it's actually how you've then curated it to be the one that is picked.
I guess then, with that in mind, how important is it that you keep the festival sort of competitive when there's a lot more international festivals that are like accessible now? Like, it's becoming cheaper to go and stay places and to move around, and to go to an international festival isn't as big a deal as it was. So if those headliners are playing other places that probably have more sun and link into a holiday, like, what's the competitive edge that you can take to keep people coming?
I think it's actually just the reputation that Download carries and the kind of the loyalty that that community builds around it. Like how many years it's been there, the site that is like important to people emotionally because they've been to Download since the start, since they could go to festivals. I think we have the privilege of having massive fan loyalty, and I think that carries us a long way. I think the scale of Download is really attractive. Like, if you're wanting to go to a small boutique festival, then we're not even in competition with that. We're talking about catering to different crowds. But I think Download is of a scale that is still really attractive to people. I think there's a lot of love for the festival, even if it is muddy and a bit rainy, just because of what it's been for so many years. And I think we do try and be competitive in at least what we're offering. Like, we don't want to rely solely on like the legacy of the festival, but I think our lineups stand up against the competition, so we have an edge because of those two things together.
Yeah, that's fair. Every year a lot of the sets are, I don't know if recorded's the right word, but I presume they're recorded, like they're on the screens, there's a lot of cameras. Why aren't they recorded and put out? Why are those never posted on TV or on YouTube? Or
It's actually just a mixture of lots of things. Every band will have different restrictions about what the copyright is for footage. So that's kind of its own challenge. Additionally, it so often relies on what purpose you're attributing to it, in the way that like some festivals in the UK are covered by the BBC. That usually tends to be the driver, like having that pre-agreed negotiation that that's what they're going to do. But I think with Download, it's not out of the question. And for a few years, we went out on Sky Arts, and at the moment we're, I think, open to finding a new place for it to be broadcast, and then taking on the challenge of negotiating with every single band what will and won't be put out, but only if there's like a purpose for it.
have you ever considered just live streaming it in different territories?
I think it's a consideration. I sadly don't know enough about it to know like why that might not be the choice that's already been made. But I know there is definitely interest, at least within my team, to make sure that it's recorded and put out literally just for posterity because of how special it is when it is happening. Just as ever, a bit more complicated than it sounds.
Yeah. Have there been any moments for you just personally where you've stood there and you just can't believe what's happening, or you can't believe that you're the one that's there?
Basically every single Download. But certainly like Fall Out Boy's set last year, a band that for me would always have been a dream headliner. Not necessarily everyone at Download's ideal dream headliner, but actually were incredible. And knowing that there was some apprehension from the core Download audience about that booking, watching the reaction be so positive, really felt like me and my 4 teammates kind of made that decision and it worked. And that was amazing because I love them and I love Download. And there was just a great 2 hours that everyone lived because of that. I know the same will be for Green Day. Like, Green Day for me are like a formative band, and to be part of a team that booked them for a festival, for me, it's just like unreal. Like, I don't know even now if I could feel comfortable believing it. It's just very odd.
With Green Day, I mean, as the comparison to Fall Out Boy, do you think Green Day are that little bit further along in terms of the Download audience accepting them more? I think, like, if like that's where download is, I think like Green Day there, Fall Out Boy were there in terms of like they're just a little
I
bit more
agree.
mainstream and a little bit less download.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I actually think Green Day they've remained a bit more consistent in what their general vibe is, where I think Fall Out Boy in creative exploration have kind of moved along that spectrum a little bit more. Green Day have just remained consistent within how they feel they're seen by people, but just are really successful at doing that. So I just think they've just remained closer to that core for longer.
Have you seen that difference in response?
Yeah, for sure. Like Green Day there's been no apprehension in announcing that. The sales are strong. Like it's a great booking for download, and we would have had them a long time ago.
You mentioned a couple times that there's 5 on the team. Who are those other 5 people and what are their jobs?
So Danica is kind of my direct counterpart, and we book District X together, etc. She is everyone's job, like I said, is half download. So she's part of the download booking team, and she also looks after all the Live Nation reps, who are the people that look after shows on the ground for Live Nation. There's Phoebe, who is currently an associate promoter, half download, half associate promoter. There is Liam, who joined us in November, who was also an associate promoter. Newer to the team, is kind of just like, wow, this is mental, you guys. And Cam, who's now the head of the booking team, and he's just like senior VP of UK touring at the moment, I think. Really well-established promoter, especially in the genre, and kind of tries to keep our ideas in check.
What would the misconceptions people have about booking a festival?
I think the main one is that it didn't occur to us to book a certain band. I think that's we keep a really close eye on comments, forums, whatever, and there was like, God, you guys have forgotten about Guns N' Roses. It's like, we often don't forget. Like, we go through every band that would be relevant, and if they're suitable for that slot, and if it works with their schedule, and if they're looking to tour, then it comes together. I think the misconception is that what we present is just what we came up with on the first draft, and it's not at all. Like, of course we know that band is out there.
If you could relive one moment of your career so far, what would it be?
I actually think it's my first time assisting on an O2 Arena tour, which I think for me might have been Ariana Grande. Because as much as it's not download at all, it was a massive thing for me to want to work in live music and to be involved in a sold out multi O2 Arena tour of that importance. I was just walking around looking at what it looks like from behind the stage, or like, these are the dressing room corridors, or this is what a day looks like ahead of an O2 Arena show. And then just the sheer amount of people. You're standing on the floor near the stage and you look up. You can't really fathom how many people that is. And that stuck with me for a long time.
I love that. That's definitely a cool moment to have lived. What are your sort of career goals then for the next however long? Like, in 30 years' time, when you are the titan of industry and you're looking back, what are the milestones that you hope you've hit?
I wish I was as organized as to have a really concrete answer for you. I think I know more than ever what part of the job I enjoy, and what I hope to be is more knowledgeable and therefore more essential within the tours in the genre. And I really want to continue to grow my roles within a festival setting. What does that mean for a final title that I'm aiming for? I don't know the answer to that. But there is thousands of things I've yet to learn about how a festival, whatever festival it is, it's not download specific, how a festival is successful and safe and has longevity and operates on the ground, because you're basically building a small town just once a summer. And that really, really interests me, the sort of operational side of things. So much of what I think when I look back on how my career has developed is that only by being in the periphery to something did I learn that opportunities even existed. Like, I didn't know what promoter's assistant was when I was working at my first label internship. So I'm hoping that I'm still actually, in some ways, in that position, that just by the proximity of the opportunities I have right now, that I will chip away at what my role will be.
In terms of what you get to see then, with all the production and everything coming together, because I think it's Fab that handle a lot of it, which is so outside to Live Nation. How much of that do you personally get to see and learn from?
We get to see quite a lot of it, but it's more because we are in communication with and guide some of the decisions. They are very much their own entity. Like, are you going to ask me what the land ownership and residential licensing rights are? No, that's not. I don't know how to help you there. But in terms of, we want to present this, guys, how do we do it? And they tell us what the challenges might be for the decisions we're making, and they keep us informed. They do a lot of it. I think they would show us more if we wanted to. We just have a lot on.
Yeah, that's fair. What advice then would you give to somebody that wanted to get into the music industry, but into live particularly?
My answer is that live is really hard to get into, and I didn't get directly into live. So if that's what you want, still be open to whatever way you can get in. Might be a boring piece of advice. I've lived that it literally worked that way, and I just persevered. I mean, I enjoyed it along the way. I think you have to love music enough, or for music to be important enough in your life for you to know that maybe data entry isn't your dream, but you're in it to a degree. And maybe trust that some rejections actually lead to kind of a better outcome, as corny as that is.
I guess that's just having a bit of resilience in terms of like being willing to keep going.
Yeah. And just honestly, for me, it just kind of worked out in a really non-linear way. And I think that's fine.
How much of that is luck and how much of it you creating your own?
I think it's me in that I had the resilience to still be there for the luck to happen. But I know that there was hundreds of applicants for my role at Live Nation, and that is luck. I connected with Anna Sophie in the right way, and the right sort of people managed to say to her, actually, I think that would be a great partnership. Like, a lot of that is luck.
That's fair. Is there anything you want to say or promote before we finish?
We've got Download coming up we start on the 13th of June, but also District X. People should, if you've never been to District X and you're at Download, I mean, certainly this is the year to come down, because Banger Boys are in the headlines a lot. But overall, it's just a different part of the festival that a lot of people in the last few years would never have even ventured to. There'll be the core that always went, and they knew it really well before me and Danica even got involved. But I can't recommend enough how much we're trying to make it a real variety show, or like culturally whole space for people who enjoy what we put on in the main arena.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Thank you for your time. It's been awesome having you on, and it's been extremely insightful. I think a lot of people will enjoy actually learning about what's going on. Thank you to everyone that's listened. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch us, we're on YouTube, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
So the UPRAWR Mental Health Foundation offers 100% free counselling and mental health services to people like us that love rock alternative music. If you're into pop punk, emo, metal, anything like that, then this is for you. It's 100% free. We have in-person counselling in Birmingham. We have online counselling for the rest of the UK. It's 100% free. There's no catch. Just visit www.uprawfoundation.org, sign up, or ask for some more information. We're here to help people that are just like us. So if you are struggling, let us know.